What's up, guys? Today I'm here at California State University East Bay in Hayward. We're going to listen to Ashton Whitty, Nuance Bro, and Isabella Chow speak. Let's go see what they have to say.
And I'm just going to be real, y'all. Y'all know our campus. It's about us. Look around us right here. And we can't focus on what you're walking into. You have to walk on what you're walking in with. So if you're afraid to show an ID to people that literally cannot hurt you.
Oh, this?
No. I'm talking about right now in that room there. They're not going to throw anything at you. They're not going to hurt you in that specific room. And that's what we want. It's going to be words. If you do not feel comfortable, you cannot come in. If you do not feel comfortable showing an ID. All you're showing an ID, I literally handed him mine. So, if y'all trust each other, then I believe you should trust the process to get in there.
Would a man like to speak for me to talk to the officer? Because apparently, like, as a feminine identified person, like, I can't speak to the man without being fucking silent.
Have y'all watched Nuance Bro video in advance? Y'all know who this person is that's gonna be here?
Yes, racist.
Okay, a lot of people said no. So if you didn't and you did, good for you, sis. But a lot of you need to be informed, so make sure you're
You determine who's racist, and even if it's a false accusation.
That's all you need to know.
Okay.
That's all you need to know. Racism.
We're right. We're against racism. So we're on the same side. We got common ground already.
Excuse me, what
so I don't know why.
channel
So
are you
can we go in there
recording for?
as
Intermediary Joe.
as opposed to
Pardon?
Intermediary Joe.
And who is that?
Me?
No, who is intermediary Joe?
I am.
You are?
Yeah.
And what is the subject of your YouTube story?
Interview people on political subjects.
But you're not interviewing anybody, you're just recording people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not going to interview people 24/7, right?
Are you a student here?
Yeah.
What
Are you a student?
I'm a professor
Professor for what?
in the theater and dance department. What do you study?
seems like it's an imagined
Nursing?
I see.
Okay.
Hate speech, contrary to what many on the left and the far left think it is not speech that they think is offensive. Hate speech isn't a legal term like free speech is. Hateful speech would probably be a better term, a more accurate term. But not being a legal term, you can't use the law to silence people who say hateful things. Now, you are well within your rights to not associate with those people, but you don't have the right to harass them. You don't have the right to release their information online. You don't have a right to visit their private property or destroy their private property and harass them. You have no right to slander and libel them. All these things, organizations like Refuse Fascism and By Any Means Necessary and other Antifa groups have done. These groups are the real political terrorists. These are the people who are actually committing the mistake of being hateful. So, I think we should make a distinction between hate speech or hateful speech, which is not a legal category, and free speech, which is protected by the First Amendment, and any attempt to restrict free speech is unconstitutional and prohibited by law. So if we make that distinction, we'll have a civil society with an open dialogue. If we don't do that, then we'll see many of the mistakes that occurred at Berkeley over the past few years occur elsewhere, and they have.
So I don't consider myself either Republican or Democrat, but what I have seen on both sides is an attempt to call the other side hateful. And I think what Troy said about distinguishing between hate speech and hateful speech is very accurate. But the question that I'd like to pose here tonight is, who defines what hate speech is? If you define what hate speech is, then chances are somebody else is going to define it a different way, and both of you are going to consider each other committers of hate speech. And the problem with that is whoever is in power, whether it's a Democrat president, Republican president, Nazi president, it doesn't matter. Whoever is in power gets to define what hate speech is and gets to punish people that they disagree with. I think it's really interesting a lot of people, or at least Troy, is already talking about the lawful term of hate speech and free speech. And it's true, hate speech and free speech is a legal term. However, while I do agree with both Isabella and Troy that it's hard to decipher what hate speech is, we have to reflect ourselves what respect is. It comes down to what you think is most respectful. And the problem with something like hate speech is that it allows people not to have a conversation about what hate speech is and get down to the bottom line of a respectful conversation. I say the bigger issue, rather than hate speech, is the lack of communication. And I'd rather have a conversation with someone of different ideologies rather than throw my finger at someone's face and say you're hateful or call them Nazi or a commie.
So hate speech, hateful speech, I mean, I don't care which one you really use, they're descriptors of a certain type of speech. Troy is correct, it's not a legal term. Free speech does cover things like hate speech. For example, there's the famous case of, I think it was the Nazis or the KKK who wanted to go through Skokie, Illinois, which is a predominantly, I think, or at least disproportionately Jewish neighborhood. And they said they had the right to do that. So it's clearly something that's protected. Now, socially, we can obviously say we abhor that sort of speech, we think it's wrong, but is it something that should be legally precluded? I would say no. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Also, I want to say that as somebody who used to be right-wing, I'm not left-wing or right-wing, as Isabella Chow said, I'm sort of on the same base as her as a moderate. I think it's so interesting, a lot of people say hate speech, the term hate speech comes from the left. I would have to disagree. Hate speech can be used from the left or the right. As you guys know, I'm sure some of you are not a fan of President Donald Trump. Well, recently he tweeted out that he wants to do an investigation on SNL for simply making fun of him, despite the fact that making fun of the president and politicians has been a part of comedy since the beginning of time. And so I think it's really important that we do talk about the fact that hate speech, this strange feeling of being triggered or whatever have you, can be both on the left and the right. At the end of the day, both sides are snowflakes.
And do you think that anybody should have the right to regulate free speech? Should social media companies like Twitter or Facebook, should they have the right to regulate your speech? Or should the government regulate them like utilities and allow everybody to have an open forum on this platform?
Sure. So I do find it very concerning that a smaller and smaller group of these giant corporations that run social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, they're having more and more control over the public dialogue. The public space is now no longer stand on a soapbox in the public park and speaking your mind or putting some sort of editorial in the newspaper. It's increasingly becoming more and more online. And the problem is that these corporations hold a ton of power. They can control the narrative however they want. We're really worried about collusion in our elections and foreign interference, but what about corporate interference? That's also very concerning. So I'm not actually opposed to government actually stepping in and maybe having some sort of internet bill of rights or something that protects people. Now, I understand the concerns because certain activities might be protected by the First Amendment that you don't necessarily want on a private platform. So something like doxing, although it's maybe in a gray area of legal, you could say that's something you don't want on your platform. Something like pornography, which is protected in some ways, you might not want on a family-friendly platform. I understand those concerns, so we have to sort of balance those out. But at the moment, I think Silicon Valley has free reign to kind of do whatever they want, and I think we could maybe take a note from the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which had protected classes and said, look, if you're a lunch counter in Mississippi, you can't discriminate against people based on their race. And I would say it's a lot easier to go from one lunch counter to another lunch counter than it is to go from Google to who's their competitor, DuckDuckGo, I don't know. So I guess I'm in favor of some intervention, but I want it to be narrowly tailored and proper.
that noise out there is the most beautiful thing I've heard in my life. That is the sound of the First Amendment. The moment that sound turns into the screams of someone being punched and physically violated, that's anathema to the founding principles of this country. This is beautiful. I think that universities should allow people like this to express their strongly held political opinions. But I don't think that they should allow people to make threats of violence. What does shut it down mean? How are you going to shut down an event?
Do we even know what we are?
You're not going to shut down an event by chanting. It's peaceful. When you say shut down an event, what you really mean is intimidate through violence the people who are speaking and force them to cancel. In other words, you're forcing people to silence their speech. So I think that universities should allow students and a lot of off-campus activists, including so-called, ironically, anti-fascists, I think they should be allowed to express their right to free speech. But they shouldn't be allowed to threaten and intimidate, harass, dox, etc., people they disagree with. So I think we can set reasonable bounds. We don't have to start drooling at the mouth and foaming and become violent. That's just not what our country's about. We're better than this. And I applaud these people for not using physical violence, and I hope they didn't use any other means of intimidation to silence us. I want to hear them just as much as they don't want to hear me.
Now, should professors have to do that when they're talking about politics again? Should they have to present both sides?
Well, I think there's a number of issues. The first issue is professors talking about politics when they shouldn't be talking about politics. The vast majority of professors in America are not political science professors. They're not journalism professors. Politics shouldn't come up. They should be focused on studying the curriculum. When they do talk about politics, I think they should strive to have curricular equity. That is, they should strive to have present a fair and balanced assessment of both sides for an argument. Sometimes there's more than two. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 or 4. If professors aren't doing that, then professors aren't doing their job. They're not being good teachers. As far as mandating that as a requirement, I think it has to occur through institute to educate professors on how to be equal in the amount of attention they give to different points of view. How do you do that? Well, who becomes professors? Graduate students, who are also undergraduate students, who are taught by other professors. So some professors need to step up. Administrators, when they're determining who to hire, they need to step up. And if they won't, I think it's fair to say that maybe people should stop sending their kids to colleges and universities and depriving them of the tuition money. Because the only way you get universities to change their bad behavior is if you hit them where it hurts, and that's their pocketbooks.
I actually think that some bias is actually inevitable when it comes to teaching, right? Even if you're an English professor, history professor, yes, you're not talking about politics, but what are you going to read, right? If an English professor assigns a news article, assigns a philosophy book, it's inevitable that in discussions of, whatever the subject material is, the teacher's viewpoint will come through. And, as a student who's almost graduating, I think that I value the opinion that my professors give me. I value learning from their opinions, and I recognize that when their bias sometimes filters through what they say, it's because they care so strongly about it that they want to bring it into the discussion and they want to influence us with their views. And I think that's okay. But what I wish more professors and instructors did was label their opinions. My very favorite professor of all time is extremely liberal. He's a law professor in our business school. And whenever he teaches, he always labels his opinions as such. And he said, this is my opinion, it's not going to be tested as fact, and I will assign you readings that completely disagree with my view that will be on the final. And I really appreciate that.
I actually had a political professor my second year of college who I thought was brilliant. She was actually liberal, And oftentimes when she would say things, I would chime in and say the complete opposite of what she would expect one of her students in the Bay Area to say. And something she told me I always stick with, she said her favorite students were the ones that challenged her, because she believed that she could learn more from her students than we could learn from her. And I always held this with me because when you take away the one side, if you only show one side of the story or one side of the narrative, one side of the information, you are not only hurting conservative students or even liberal students in some cases across the US, you're hurting their education. You're hurting people who want to learn something new or different. You're hurting the conversations they could have, the information they could share. You're hurting the nuance that they deserve to know. And I think when it comes down to sharing information amongst professors, there definitely is a bias in some cases. But I also want to talk about, at the end of the day, what we need more from our professors is not just bias, is the ability to let us question everything. At the end of the day, if I put down a Fox News article and a CNN article, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Fox News and CNN are both fake news. The Democrats and the Republicans are the exact same party. The left and the right are both BS. At the end of the day, all news should be questioned. Every article you put in front of you should be questioned. You should tell your professors not what you take from the article and what you read, but what you question. The most important thing you can take away from college or any education system is the questions you ask yourself and the questions you ask the system.
On the question of whether it should be mandated that you present an equal amount of both sides, I disagree with that. I don't think it should be mandated. I think people should do their research about what kind of university they want to attend, and you have historically black colleges, you have Christian universities, Mormon universities, you have all kinds of different schools that you can attend if that's something that you want. But generally, I mean, if you actually, let's say you have kids and you want to send them to university, you should care that they get diversity of opinions. That's something you should care about. If you want them to be smart and socially and intellectually well-adjusted, I think that's something you should cherish and desire. I mean, you notice this when someone's, for example, let's say you meet someone who moved from a heavy red state, but they happen to be liberal. They tend to be smarter than the people who are conservative in that deep red state. Conversely, in a heavy blue state, when you meet someone who happens to be very conservative, they tend to be smarter than the liberal people in that deep blue state. And it's because they've had their ideas challenged by those around them constantly, so they've always been able to hone in on, the little nuances of the argument, and they're just way better at making their points. And that's something I think everybody should want. They should all want to, oh, is this part of my argument solid, or maybe I'm wrong on this point? I don't know how many people in the audience want to participate, but how many of you have ever had an idea that you thought was something you were really passionate about it, and then you totally found out it was all wrong? Anybody? It's unfortunate that it's not more of the room. That's kind of sad, but I mean, for those that have raised your hand, just think about the mentality that you had back then when you did believe that thing, and just the huge shift you had when you realized it was a lie or you were misinformed. Realize that that could still be you today, and you could be learning a lot more new things.
They know that what they're attacking is not fascism, but they're still going to use the word to silence and intimidate people they disagree with. Or they're willing to bang against doors, like children. No, sir. I would encourage you to read scholarly literature. I'm sure the library here would be a great resource. And I would say that at the end...
do you mind keeping questions on the Q&A? If you disagree, you gotta go first.
I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. I'm not a professor. You might want to ask a professor to get educated. But I will say this. If you have a legitimate disagreement, you can express that without calling people names.
Thank you. My first comment is just for Troy. I asked you a simple question. Are you a fascist? Because it seemed like you were the new fascism, and you told me to go read a book.
Can I ask you, if I may, what's your definition of fascism?
That wasn't, you were describing it.
I'll give you my understanding.
You were describing it.
So the answer to your question is no. I am not a fascist. Let's get this on the record. So my understanding of fascism is it's a Marxist term that was applied to many far-right, authoritarian, deadly regimes in Europe in the last century, including Nazis. Now, Italian fascism is different than National Socialism, which is the German variety of this authoritarianism. But you also have the Franco regime in Spain, you have regimes in Romania, and other places. So fascism refers to a particular historical, political, philosophical phenomenon in the last century. So when people go around asking me, am I a fascist? That question just doesn't make sense and is sort of absurd on its face. I think you can ask me what I believe in specific areas of policy. That might be a way to find out what I believe. But to ask me if I'm a fascist, to me that seems to me not to be a question asked in good faith. It seems to me to be a question asked either out of ignorance or out of a malicious intent to harm. Now, I don't think you're being malicious. It seems to me that you generally had a real question, right? So I'm totally willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and to give you my understanding, and I hope you'll look more into the issue too, and maybe you'll learn more about me, and maybe you'll learn more about history in the 20th century.
Definitely. So my next question is...
there's one question per person.
Alright, so y'all all said you love the noise of the protesters. You accept challenge, you want challenge. So for the people who are actually challenging you today, why don't you let them ask questions? Why don't we let some of these people in and ask questions? Can we allow people in to ask questions? Because y'all said y'all want to be challenged.
So my understanding is that they're actually allowed in here, but they didn't want to follow the rules of coming in here. So.
Exactly.
They should have been in here to listen first. Like, they should have come in here and then they don't know they're coming in here blind, they don't even know what they said.
Mic drop.
The people out there don't know what the people on the panel said, or what did I miss? So we're gonna let them in and say what?
I just want to let you guys know, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but this is the most diverse campus in the continental United States. We pretty much are made up of first-generation students, which means we are the first students to go to college, if not graduate, from a university. So most of us are very privileged to be here, I will say that. But one thing I will disagree with you at is that you said that a lot of us are uninformed and that we don't know what we're talking about. What I will say is that a lot of these students are some of the most diverse audience members you guys are ever going to have. These people in this room are the ones who have been limited significantly, if not by education, but by other social limitations as well. So if anyone's informed in this room, I'm going to say it's these people sitting down who are...
Are you saying that...
But what I am saying, though, is that, obviously on both sides we both agree that to some limit we are both ignorant. I think that you guys believe that too, that we don't understand your side. Can you guys agree with that? As much as we don't as well. But what I will say, though, is that you can't just show up to campuses like this beautiful campus, where there are so many diverse faces in this room who have experienced a lot.
Is there
politically? No, but what I'm saying is, though, is don't you feel at some point as well that when you come to campuses like this, that you kind of need to keep in mind that there are differences? And if there is going to be a positive communicative space, we all need to keep in mind different experiences, different locations, and different education spaces and levels. So, if not to come here and say, you guys don't know, or you guys don't have the same educational experience, wouldn't that mean that you should educate? wouldn't that mean that we should educate? I just wanted to, point that out.
So I just wanted to ask, is there a particular speaker who said people here were uninformed? Which one?
Green shirt. I do.
Okay. If you want to take the question.
Well, I said I wasn't accusing anyone here of being uninformed about what fascism is. I'm saying there are many people on liberal college campuses like Berkeley, like Cal State East Bay, who go around calling people fascists. And I actually don't think they understand what the term means. And I think it's not my place to educate them. That's what history professors and political science professors are for. I applaud you as a journalist. You're the kind of people who are the gatekeepers. You're part of this educational project. You're helping everyone learn, and that's a great thing. I will say too that I am a first-generation college student. I went to UC Berkeley, even though all of my ancestors, going back dozens of generations, have never gone to college. I'm a descendant of ranchers and farmers who made their living off of the milk and honey of the earth. So I understand what it means to come from that background, to have to educate yourself. My parents didn't graduate from college. They went to high school and they got jobs afterwards. I didn't learn anything from them about communism, fascism, anthropology, sociology, literature, you name it. I had to do that myself. I had to rely on my high school teachers, my middle school teachers, my professors. So I understand what it means to be a first-generation college student, what it means to be diverse, and what it means to face certain discriminations. I've had mobs of people chase me down in the streets who wanted to do me physical violence. I've had at least half a dozen friends who've actually ended up in the hospital over the past 2 years. So I know what it means to face hate. I sympathize with that, and I hope that everyone here agrees that that kind of behavior is unacceptable and that we should be helping each other, not putting each other down.
I actually have an answer for her as well. I applaud you for being so calm and honest with your answer, by the way. So my whole thing is that we're obviously all from different sides of the spectrum. I have been left, I have been right, I have been all over the place. And I think it's definitely an issue where we don't understand each other. That's why we need to have a conversation. We need to have understanding of one another. And it's wrong just to point the finger at someone and call them ignorant, because at the end of the day, we're a little ignorant too on some things. So I applaud you for coming up here and being brave and saying that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. I'm going to have a seat. You guys can continue though.
Sure, I was going to say something as well.
Sure,
Just one for the next questioners. Once you ask the questions, go to your seat. That'd be awesome.
I'm wearing uncomfortable shoes. I need to stand a little. Thank you.
So one thing I wanted to say is I wasn't coming here with any sort of oh, you guys are uninformed or you guys don't have different experiences. Obviously, I realize people do. But I think one of the problems is that we don't communicate, as we've been saying throughout this talk. I've had people, I'm clearly a brown guy, and people have called me a Nazi, even though if they actually watch my videos, my latest video is literally me responding to a white nationalist who's claiming that illegal immigrants are committing more crime. And my video is literally saying, no, all your stats are bullshit. That's actually not true. So I make videos like that, and then I have people who come up to me and say, you're a Nazi. I'm like, based on what, dude? Because I have a microphone and a camera? What's your reasoning for that? They're like, well, you went and talked to those people. I'm like, I'm talking to you too. That doesn't mean anything. I talk to everyone. It's kind of my job. But it's just really frustrating when people prejudge like that, and they also otherize you, they dehumanize you. The same way a lot of these actual fascists, who they go and dehumanize others, like, oh, this racial group or that religious group or whatever, they dehumanize them in order to, perpetuate that hate and, justify whatever sort of bigotry they have against them. People on the left also do that towards people like me. They can justify their hatred if they dehumanize you, if they don't talk to you, if they otherize you, and I just think I think we need to be better than that.
Okay, hi, my name is Stephanie Mireles, and like many of us, I am a first generation student that comes from a single mom. She is also a lesbian, so she has a partner. my question was for Isabella. When the thing that stuck out to me the most was you said it doesn't matter what type of president we have. Is he Nazi? Is he Republican? Democrat? Whatever. But I think that's very crucial, and it is important because America is built of diversity. It's an entire melting pot. So it is a threat when we have somebody on Twitter saying, you know, like we're gonna build an entire wall to like keep these people away. So it does matter. I think it does matter, and I completely disagree with that. And there's other points that you made, which I totally appreciate. You took the time to explain this to me. I came in with a very, very like angry mentality. But you know what? Some of the things that you said didn't make sense. But I think that's the most powerful thing and the most like ignorant thing I think that could have said, just like as we are ignorant of not having enough education of like other things. It's ignorant to say that it doesn't matter what type of president we have, because he is a leader. And you have to face him at the end of the day. And a lot of people in America are afraid to speak out and have the freedom of speech. So it is crucial, and it is important, and it does matter.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to clarify that. It definitely matters. That's why you should all vote. I voted as soon as I was 18. I think it definitely matters who our president is. I'm just saying that as long as we refuse to talk to each other, it doesn't matter who's in power, because our nation's going to be polarized. If we have, it doesn't matter who sits on the president's seat. As long as we're refusing to listen to each other, our nation's not going to get better. Bring it back to the context of what I was saying.